of togetherness. We need it now more than ever before. These and all of the blessings we ask in the perfect and precious name of Jesus. Amen. Join me in the book of Nehemiah. This is a text I've had the pleasure of wrestling with before in chapter 2, but I've never wrestled with it quite in this context. Nehemiah 2, verses 17 through 18. Nehemiah 2, verses 17 through 18. And I will be reading from the New Revised Standard Version of the Holy Bible. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in? How Jerusalem lies in ruins, with its gates burned. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so that we may no longer suffer disgrace." I told them that the hand of my God had been gracious upon me, and also the words that the king had spoken to me. Then they said, "Let us start building." So they committed themselves to the common good. Let me also take a moment and lift up, just beneath the sacred text, I want to lift up secular text. And this text comes from President Barack Obama's second inauguration speech in January of 2013. President Obama said, "It is now our generation's task to carry on what those pioneers began. For our journey is not complete until our wives, our mothers, and our daughters can earn a living equal to their efforts. Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we truly are created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well. Our journey is not complete until no citizen is forced to wait for hours to exercise the right to vote. Our journey is not complete until we find a better way to welcome the striving, hopeful immigrants who still see America as a land of opportunity. This is our generation's task, to make these words, these rights, these values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness real for every American." My brothers and my sisters, I want to talk with you for just a few moments this morning from the topic, 4 words: build back better, vote. Build back better, vote. Over the course of the last few days here in North Carolina and over the last week or so in other parts of the United States, people have been voting. And people have been voting with record enthusiasm and in record numbers. Now, although voting as an exercise of democracy is supposed to be about the future, the motivation for voting is sometimes about the past. In 2008 and 2012, for example, when Barack Obama was elected and re-elected as president of these United States of America, although those elections were very much about the future, people were enthusiastically voting. They were motivated to vote because they were well aware of problems in America's distant past. Similarly, now in 2020, as people are again enthusiastically voting, people are voting for their futures, but people are also voting because we're dealing with so many problems in our very recent past and in our present. Over the course of the last 4 years, let me be clear, America has been run down. America has gone from a place where we at least talked about inclusion to becoming a place where we promulgate executive orders that are all about exclusion, especially against black people from African countries and brown people from Mexico. We've become a place where we'd rather shut down the government for the longest time in the history of America over the issue of immigration and talking about building a wall of separation instead of talking about diplomacy and bringing people together at a table of community. Oh, if the narrative of Make America Great Again is anything real, the truth of the matter is we've seen America at her worst again. With domestic unrest over Confederate monuments, with police brutality being documented at frequencies like never before, and with the festival of bigots spewing hate and white nationalism in Charlottesville, Virginia, America came to realize that white supremacy is alive and well and living high on the hog at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, all on a taxpayer dime. After all, there are fine people on both sides. What I'm trying to say is that people are being motivated to vote because America is being broken, and voting is the only way right now to rebuild. So if you're tired of seeing problems, don't just close your eyes to them. Vote. If you're tired of hearing about problems, don't just close your ears to them. Vote. And if you're tired of listening to problems, vote. Vote if you're willing to be a part of the future. Vote if you're willing to save the soul of America, and vote if you're willing to end this culture of division. Vote like you've never voted before. Now is not the first time we've seen a homeland torn apart. And so far as America is being destroyed figuratively, the capital city of Jerusalem was destroyed literally. And we can all learn a little something, in our case, about coming together to vote, about civic participation, and looking at this model for civic participation as set by our brother Nehemiah when we look at this biblical text. When we look at the text now, we're preaching this morning from one of the most popular narratives in the Old Testament, right as it's right for the ears of America as people are in the process of voting, coming together to rebuild something precious, something that has been damaged, and something that is desperately in need of repair. Now, unlike his contemporary Ezra, who was a temple priest and who was also responsible for rebuilding after King Nebuchadnezzar came and tore everything down in the Babylonian exile, our brother Nehemiah was not a member of the clergy. He wasn't in the pulpit. Nehemiah was in the pew. Meaning, Nehemiah, in the context of today's souls to the polls, early voting, wasn't the one who was preaching, trying to rile up the troops. Nehemiah was the one who was organizing. Nehemiah was the one who was going to line up the cars and pass out the literature. He's the one who invited people from other congregations, including a rabbi from a Jewish synagogue, to join with us and participate in democracy. That means Nehemiah, as a member of the laity, took the work of rebuilding in his own hands and motivated people to participate in democracy. The storyline now of the book of Nehemiah is about rebuilding war-torn Jerusalem after it hit one of its lowest points, all because of the invasion of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the parallelism I see here is that although Nebuchadnezzar tore down physical walls in Jerusalem, the current occupant of the White House is tearing down symbolic walls here in America. He's torn down a wall of confidence known as executive authority. He's torn down a wall of respect once held for the office of the president. And he's torn down the very fabric of these United States of America. As to where Nebuchadnezzar wreaked havoc on urban communities, the current occupant of the White House is wreaking havoc on people's hope and on people's hearts. Nebuchadnezzar locked up Hebrew families in Babylon with his administration. Now, this administration is separating Mexican children from their families and locking them up at the Mexico border. And if we were to find Nebuchadnezzar openly mocking God of the Hebrews, the current occupant of the White House openly used the Bible as a prop after tear gassing peaceful protesters in Washington, D.C., all to take a photo in front of St. John's Church. I guess the old expression really is true. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But watch this. Whenever there's a problem, there's always a solution. Whenever there's an issue, there's always an answer. And whenever defeat makes it seem as though victory is impossible, the truth of the matter is things are always possible when it comes to God. Oh, I serve a God who is able and a God who is worthy to be praised. From the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, the God I serve is worthy. He's worthy. My God is worthy to be praised. Now, there's a transition in this text, and the transition is based on perspective. In verse 17, Nehemiah says, "You see the trouble we are in? How Jerusalem lies in ruins. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so that we no longer suffer in disgrace." Nehemiah is thinking back about the greatness of what was while simultaneously looking at the despicable situation he's standing in. At the same time, Nehemiah was holding on to hope. He believed that if people were going to build, if people were going to build back, if people were going to build back together, they had to overcome the tragedy of their situation. In other words, if people would vote, they could rebuild the walls of democracy here in the United States of America. If people organized to get out the vote, they could rebuild humanity's hope. And if people were willing to encourage somebody else to vote, we can reconnect families and reconnect people who have been torn apart in the midst of despair. Oh, and looking back, Nehemiah remembers the splendor and the marvel of what once was in Jerusalem. He's holding on to memories of the highest points because looking at his current situation, Nehemiah is at one of the lowest points in his country's history. Oh, if Nehemiah were here in America, Nehemiah might tell you, "I remember how people were excited about government. People were excited about America because everybody loved Barack Obama." Nehemiah might tell you that he remembers America's priorities were making sure everybody had universal health care and everybody had a seat at the table because we take into consideration all policies, including global warming. Nehemiah might tell you that he remembers a culture of diversity and inclusion where everybody was affirmed, regardless of race, color, creed, or sexual orientation, even right here in the United States of America. Now, however, how things have changed. Now, if Nehemiah were here, he would tell you that Jerusalem isn't the only place where things have reached an all-time low. Nehemiah might tell you that America went from being a place where the president affirmed everyone to being a place where we enact hate, deliberately shooting Mexicans outside a super Walmart store in El Paso, Texas, just because the current occupant of the White House has some problems with Mexico. We went from a place where the American president would bring people together. Now we're a place where the president uses dog whistle language to tear people apart and embolden hate groups to try to take out the governor of Michigan and the governor of Virginia. Oh, America once was a place where our seniors could have confidence in receiving their prescription medication in the mail. Now, however, America has become a place where the President of the United States tries to undermine the post office, all because he doesn't want you to have your ballot. He doesn't want you to have the opportunity to mail it in. He doesn't want you to have the opportunity to vote him out of office. If the old saying is true, that the more things change, the more they stay the same, if Nehemiah were here in America, he'd take a look at all that's going on and say, "Do you see the trouble we're in?" Yes. Now, just like there's a transition in the text, there's a similar transition in our time. Just like Nehemiah, although we too are seeing the worst of things, we too can find motivation by looking back at America's brighter days. 2020 has presented its share of challenges. But 2020 has also given us an opportunity to introspectively reflect on the lives of those who have gone on to glory, and their names have been written in the book of life. Among others, 2020 called home Congressman John Lewis, 2020 called home Reverend C.T. Vivian, and 2020 called home the actor Chadwick Boseman. For each of those names, it makes me think about the past, and each of those names motivates me to get out and vote right now. When I think about the past, I think about Congressman John Lewis because of his heroism in marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday, because it means that all Americans, somebody say all Americans have the right to vote. I think about the past and I think about C.T. Vivian because long before 2020's peaceful protests in Minneapolis, Minnesota or Portland, Oregon, Reverend Vivian showed the world that civil disobedience is a part of the American lexicon, and just because we disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable. As I think about the positive images of blackness portrayed by the Black Panther, my brother Chadwick Boseman, Wakanda forever. I will forever remember the political activism of black actors like Harry Belafonte, who used his celebrity to effectuate political change long before LeBron James or Colin Kaepernick justifiably started taking a knee. Oh, if we all are going to be a little bit like Nehemiah and we all are going to find motivation by looking at the past, let the truth be known, as much as I love the soon-to-be vice president, name it and claim it, preach it and speak it. As much as I love the soon-to-be vice president of these United States of America, the truth of the matter is, you would have never heard the name Kamala Harris if it not had been for names like Carol Moseley Braun and Shirley Chisholm. What I'm trying to say is that there's nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed by what's right with America. Build back together, vote! Just like there's a tension in the text or transition in the text, we also see God's grace in this text. We see God's mercy in this text, and we see the loving hand of God in this biblical text. In verse 18, Nehemiah says, I told them that the hand of my God had been gracious upon me. And they said, let's start rebuilding. In other words, as Nehemiah was talking to people on the day that they were going to do their own version of Souls to the Polls, as they were getting ready to vote, Nehemiah is saying, no matter how bad 2020 has been, no matter how insurmountable some obstacles might seem, no matter how many barriers have been put in your way, we still serve a God who is able and a God who is worthy to be praised, because God is still on the throne. God can still show up and God can still make a way, but we've got to be willing to do our part in coming together with this rebuilding, meaning we've got to be willing to vote. Vote like your life depended on it. Vote because somebody gave their life so you could have the right to vote. Vote because it's the only way to rebuild democracy in America. Vote because the soul of our nation is on the ballot. Vote, vote, vote like you've never done before. Build back together. Come together. Vote. If you hear me as saying nothing else right now in the midst of these very dark days, God did not let evil continue to rule over Jerusalem, and God is not going to let evil continue to rule over these United States of America. But the only way to get Nebuchadnezzar out of the White House is we've got to vote. Nehemiah, in this text, was willing to do the work, and God showed Nehemiah favor. Nehemiah was willing to do the organizing, and God blessed the work that was assigned to Nehemiah's hand. God gave Nehemiah favor, and you know what they say about favor. Favor ain't always fair. That's why they call it favor. Favor is what Martin Luther King Jr. had, because in 1963, he told America about his dream, but favor meant in 1965, he got to see America pass legislation so everybody could vote. Favor is what John Lewis had. He didn't just march across a bridge in Selma, Alabama. John Lewis got to serve in the Congress all the way up in Washington, D.C. Favor is what Barack Obama had. Favor took Barack Obama from Hawaii to Indonesia, from Indonesia to Chicago, and from Chicago to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Oh, favor. Favor, my brothers and sisters, means that if you're willing to do your part, God is going to do God's part. Favor means no matter how bad things look right now, we still serve a God who is able and a God who is worthy to be praised. A God who can give you more than you could ever wish, want, or imagine. And favor means God will show you favor, just like God showed Nehemiah favor, just like he showed Jerusalem favor. God will show America favor if you're willing to do your part. That means you got to vote. Build back together. Vote. I want to close now by sharing with you two things. I want to make a statement, and then I want to ask you a question. The statement is one I learned from one of my mentors in the church, Bishop Adam Jefferson Richardson, the senior bishop of the church, used to serve as the bishop over the 2nd Episcopal District. He's told me and other young pastors this: He says, the pastor will inevitably bring the church to his or her level. Let me park that right there for a minute. That can be an up or down situation. The pastor will bring a congregation to his or her level. If you've had more than one pastor, you know that statement is true. Well, watch this. The relational dynamics that apply between a pastor and a congregation also apply between a president and the people of the United States of America. Just like you've had more than one pastor, I know you've had more than one president. Now, the question I want to pose for you, I want you to look introspectively at the same question that Nehemiah poses rhetorically. And that is this: do you see the trouble we are in? Do you see how the United States of America used to be a leader, but when it comes to other nations, we now are a laughing stock? Do you see the trouble we're in? Do you see how our response to the global pandemic of COVID-19 has been to fight with one another about wearing a mask, while we've given 3 stages of response? First, shh, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to scare everybody. We then move to, it's like magic. It's going to go away as soon as it gets warm outside. It's all just going to go away. Now that he has had it, and now that he has gone to Walter Reed and drank some vampire juice, he's come out saying, I'm bigger and better than I was before. Let everybody get it, and we'll just get herd immunity, and we'll all just get over it. But not everybody's going to make it. That's a formula for genocide. Do you realize I know plenty of folks back in New Orleans that are a part of the 220,000 Americans that have died for COVID-19? Can I bring it closer to home? The person who would otherwise be sitting right here, an associate minister of this church, her mother died because of COVID-19. And our response is to fight with one another, politicizing wearing a mask. Do you see the trouble we're in? Democracy is on the ballot. Dignity is on the ballot. The soul of what we love in America is on the ballot. Build back together. Vote